Good evening and welcome to Hear, O Israel. We're broadcasting from the studios of the New Covenant Congregation of Israel on behalf of AT&T Community TV and on behalf of everyone who assists in the production of Hear, O Israel. I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Tamar Israel and I'll be your hostess for tonight's show. With me here in the studios is Sister Johanna Israel. Sister,
Shalom, sister.
Shalom. Welcome to the show. Our show tonight is entitled Martial Law. Now, I know you're wondering, what in the world does martial law have to do with the scriptures? But you'd be surprised. This is the fulfillment of the scriptures, actually, and that's what our program for tonight, is to show you how martial law is actually being implemented in the United States and throughout the world as we speak. So you need to be prepared for what's about to happen, because believe me, plans have been laid solid, and it's been way before September 11th. So before we get started, Johanna, can we give our audience a definition of what is martial law? Where did the word martial come from?
Well, the word martial, when you go to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, what you'll find is under martial, it says that martial is adjective, obviously, and it's relating to or suited for war or warrior. And it also states that experienced and inclined to war, warlike. And one of the main entries that's involved there, it states reference to the word Mars. So martial comes from Mars.
Right.
And then when you go and you research what Mars is, Mars is a Roman god of war.
Okay.
So just like many of the languages many of the words within our language that we use today, it all relates back to Roman gods and Greek gods and so forth. Okay. And this is why it's called martial law, because of this god of war. Yes, this god of war.
We've got a picture of this so-called god of war, gods that the Romans made for themselves, but they believe heavily in this. As you said, Johanna, and for the past 2,000 years, the Romans or the Europeans have implemented martial law throughout the world to impose their will because of this so-called god of war.
Absolutely.
Very, very good.
Yeah, and also, if we look at the planets, the planet Mars, the fourth planet from the sun, was also named after this god of war, Mars.
Right.
So throughout our language, they pretty much infiltrate our daily conversation with their gods.
Exactly.
So everything kind of continues back forth.
Then we have to mention that their third month is also named after this god, Mars, March.
Exactly,
Mars. So,
exactly.
Everything that they do has been outlined, and this is nothing, it's only secret to those of us who don't study these things and seek the answers out. But once you do begin to seek out the answers, everything ties together, just like church and state, even though they say it doesn't.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about how they've implemented martial law and what will be the levels of authority with martial law in the future.
Right. Now, actually, when you actually go in, let me give the legal terms as far as martial law once you break it down from the actual meaning and so forth. It's a temporary complete control by military authorities imposed upon a civilian population when civil unrest or economic crises or major disaster and so forth threatens the public safety as so seen by the commander-in-chief, there being the president, or also by the governors. Because the fact of the matter is, in addition to the president, a governor of a state can also declare martial law. They can declare martial law for a city, a street, or the entire state. As a matter of fact, we experienced this situation in Florida. I want to read a little bit about that. It just happened it was actually 4 days prior to September 11th. Everybody is, up in arms about the whole September 11th deal.
Right.
But in actuality, 4 days prior to September 11th, the governor of Florida, who is also the brother of the President Jeb Bush, who's the brother of George Bush, he actually put into effect a type of martial law. It wasn't the direct martial law at that point, but I want to read it. And it says basically what he did was he gave he approved. He set up a Florida executive order, and within these executive orders, it puts out an order basically that will allow or disallow certain things. And in that it states, he gives hereby all necessary authority, improved budgetary appropriations, grants, and so forth, in order for the Florida National Guard to be put into active service, and for the purpose of training to support law enforcement personnel, emergency management personnel in the event of civil disturbances, natural disasters, and to provide training for the law enforcement personnel and so forth as far as counter drug operations and so forth. And then he goes on to state that this executive order will remain in full force and effect until it's revoked or until June 30th of 2003.
Wow.
So this was put in place prior to the entire September 11th deal, and basically what it did was give the proper budgetary allocations and so forth in order for this to take place.
Wow.
And what this does is allows the Florida National Guard to basically take over all police duties. Exactly. They are presently over your county sheriffs, your local police departments, and also FEMA. So pretty much it gave them complete control.
Okay. Listen to this. This is actually taken from an article by Gary North. Everybody may remember Gary North tied with the Iran-Contra downfall, etc. But Gary North says in his Y2K links and forums, if the computer failures are sufficiently widespread, urban society will collapse. Without banks, water, sewer, communications, and electrical power, cities will become nightmares. Under such conditions, the federal government would have to declare martial law. There are indications that the U.S. government is preparing for martial law and has been since the early 1990s. Under the cover of the phrases critical infrastructure protection or terrorism, which is the one we've heard lately, the government is setting up rapid deployment forces designed to provide order in American cities. So we see that this has started to happen way before September 11th.
Absolutely.
Y2K was one of the reasons they thought that they may have to implement this this so-called martial law. But everything went according to plan, and we know what that was all about. That was to change over the computer system to begin to get ready for this new world order.
And to start that whole role of fear in the public.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah. And
next came September 11th. And we know that now people are ready to lay down their freedom.
Exactly.
For all of this so-called security.
Right.
Now they're calling it what? Homeland security.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, based on what you just said about the September 11th, now I just read about Jeb Bush and so forth and putting forth these executive orders. Well, that was 4 days prior to September 11th. Right. On September 11th, now let's remember that Florida is more than 1,000 miles away from the World Trade Center. On September 11th, Jeb Bush put another executive order that actually put the state of Florida into a complete martial law, or it put it under martial law. And what he did was, Florida was the very first state to declare this this state of emergency, although they were so far away.
Right.
Even before New York, before what do you call DC and so forth, so far away they weren't even attacked. But he did in fact do this, and I want to read that also.
Okay.
And it says, I hereby declare a state of emergency exists in the state of Florida. He says the authority to suspend the effect of any statute or rule governing state business. He also further to suspend the effect of any order of rule or government entity, to seize and utilize any and all real estate, personal property. Also to order the evacuation of any persons from any location within the state of Florida, the authority to regulate the movement of persons, and also to regulate the return of evacuees from their home.
Wow.
And he says he activated the Florida National Guard during the duration of this emergency. Now, if you remember, the other executive order allowed for a expiration date. This one has no expiration date whatsoever. It's open-ended, which means to this day, today, the state of Florida is presently under a martial law. So truly, it's very easy for this to take place, and this is not known at all.
Listen to this. This is again from Gary North's article. It says plans to impose martial law have been in effect since the later plans have been in effect since 1997. The training, however, is the same, so the public will not be alarmed. The Army has created special emergency response divisions made up of the National Guard units and reserve units. But the plans seem to have begun with an executive order signed by President Clinton in July of 1996, which set up the Presidential Commission on Critical Infrastructure Protection. And now that all of this is coming out, that the government allowed September 11th to happen, then we understand why. Now they have the public's attention. Now they can readily say, hey, you give me some of your freedom, we'll protect you.
Right.
Well, how can you protect me from someone strapping on a bomb and coming into the restaurant that I'm visiting? I mean, there's examples that there is no protection against this, and we see that in Israel today.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this was so that they can control the society, not only through physical control, but electronic controls, technological controls. We're going to get into that in this program. But first, let's go back into some examples of martial law in the scriptures, because it's replete with examples, especially as relates to our people, the Hebrew Israelites. It seems that we've had one nation after another impose their will upon us, even in our land.
Right.
So no wonder we were kicked out.
Absolutely. Well, just like the scripture states, there's nothing new under the sun.
Absolutely.
And the same way that there's martial law being enacted today and has been throughout history, there was, like you stated, throughout the scriptures also.
Okay.
If we go back into to the book of Exodus, the first chapter, we'll find the story of our people when we first went into the land of Egypt. We were pretty much doing very well at that point.
Right.
We waxed fat and we grew abundantly. Our numbers increased. And that was the time at which our king, Joseph was second in command at that point. He was ruling. Well, after Joseph died, came another king. This king didn't know Joseph.
Okay.
And therefore, he saw the numbers of our people growing and stated at that point, these people are growing too large.
Right.
And he feared that the fact that these people may go ahead and join on to another enemy nation and overthrow them. So
Don't you think that's still a fear today?
No, certainly, most definitely. So therefore, that's when he started to inflict hard bondage upon us.
Okay.
And then after that, matter of fact, let me read a little bit here. And this is in this is in Exodus chapter 1, and I'll pick it up at verse 10. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when they falleth out in any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities of Pithom and Ramesses. So at this point, that's when they enacted that type of martial law. They put us in bondage.
Right.
They pretty much went back to our definition of martial law. They restricted their movement.
Exactly.
They took away their personal properties. All the things that martial law is today is what they did then.
And made them work under armed guard.
Exactly. So therefore, now that was the first portion of the martial law that he set up. That wasn't enough for him. He went on, and after that, because our people were still growing, even with this being put upon us, he stated that he wanted our Hebrew male children, to be killed. And he stated that was more of a type of a local martial law or executive order. So he stated that directly to the Hebrew women. I'm sorry, to the midwives. Let me read that. And again, chapter 1, and I'll pick it up in verse 15. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of one was Zipporah and the other was Puah. And he said, when you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him, but if it be a daughter, then he shall live. And as we know in the story that the Hebrew women did not continue with this process, they allowed them to live. So then he enacted a complete, a national executive order, and had all of the boys to be thrown into the river.
Right.
So that was the second portion of the third portion of this martial law that was enacted upon our people, just within this short time period.
Right.
So truly, this has been going on for some time. But the thing is, we think of this as being large and grave because we see the end results.
Right.
You have to look at it when it first started. If you look at this, it started, there were 3 portions to this, and you have to see it for when it comes. The same way things are going down now.
Exactly.
Like you stated, when it started with the whole Y2K, that would be our first case. So everything was going crazy, and they're telling us that, all the computers, you're going to lose your money, everything's going to go haywire, and they started putting executive orders in then. That was number 1. Number 2 is now the September 11th. People are giving up our daily freedoms left and right. Civil liberties are going completely out the door. So that's number 2. So we're waiting, it's continuing. So the fact of the matter is, when these things happen, you don't look for the large thing, watch the steps.
Right.
And that's what's going on now. We have these steps taking us towards that method, taking us towards martial law.
And then, to put it back on our race, our nation, the things that happened to us during the time of the Egyptian enslavement is still happening. We call it today racial profiling. We see that our males are filling up the prison houses, but we don't stop to think, well, why is this going on?
Right.
Why is it that when we move into a neighborhood, whites move out.
Right.
When we transfer our children into their schools, they withdraw their children. Why is it that we cannot get any further than our foreparents were?
Right.
A lot of people will say, well, we've arrived, we've got this liberty, but we haven't.
Right.
They've stripped us of our liberty, and we are still dying by the alarming numbers from every disease. So there's still carrying out upon our people this type of martial law, but it's covert now.
Exactly.
And we don't want to look at the signs and symbols and read and see that we're still being preyed upon.
Right. Even when you think of the system, the school system and so forth, everyone is really praising the entire changeover with the school system, where now we can send our children to private schools. But what you have to, again, look into is the fact that, first of all, most of the choices are going to be your parochial schools, where they're forcing these children to be taught and fed these doctrines that we know that are untrue.
Absolutely.
In addition to the schools that are in your neighborhood, they plan on shutting these schools down. So they say, well, if the school's not doing good enough, we're going to shut it down. So we're going to have all these empty buildings right in the middle of our areas.
Ghetto areas.
Urban areas.
Right.
So we're going to have these places which will then be detention areas. You have to, I mean, then that's not going to, you have to, again, look towards the future, what's happening.
Exactly. The many phases that they've implemented. Today, you can't go into a middle school without an office for police security.
Right.
Many of the schools, especially in the urban areas, have metal detectors and police all around. Why is it that you don't see the same thing in white schools? There's a reason for that. Black children are being carted through the judicial system left and right for little or nothing. And I happened to ask an attorney once, well, why is it that when you go to juvenile, you only see our children? Don't tell me that we're the only ones getting in trouble. And she said, no, your administrators are the ones calling the jails.
Right.
The white kids and their administrators, they're not calling the jails for when they get caught with marijuana and drugs and
or just fighting.
Yeah,
as if
or just
kids
fighting.
Kids don't fight these. You know, and you know, that's really something to me, the whole issue of fighting and so forth. There was a time, children are children. Adults can barely, maintain, hold them, get along decently. But children, if they have a fight, there was a time when they got chastised and suspended.
Right.
And in 2 weeks they'd be back.
Exactly.
These days, if you fight, then you have your likelihood, of course, like you said, they call in the police, they go to jail.
That's right.
For fighting another child. Right, for fighting another child the same age. I mean, that's a touch ridiculous. I mean,
quite
truly.
a touch. But it's all to get you ready to what? Give up your freedoms. And these things are being implemented on us and on our people, and we're the ones thinking that we've arrived.
Right.
Well, we haven't. And the longer we think so, those of us who have decent paying jobs and decent homes and living in the suburbs, we haven't arrived until the people that are beneath us, the masses of our people, have come up to that standard. And it's not going to be possible in America.
And these curses follow us wherever we go.
Wherever we go. That's why they move out.
Right.
Okay, let's go on in history. Let's talk a little bit about our time in Babylon. What happened during that time of our existence?
Okay, well, let me go ahead into Daniel and pick up our time in Babylon. And that time was the time where you talk about Daniel, and that's in Daniel 3. And let me see, I'll pick it up at Daniel 3. I pick it up a couple of different places. At that time, the king in charge of Babylon was Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar, just like so many other kings before him, they have a feeling, and they enact their feeling upon everyone else. Well, he decided he wanted to build this statue of gold and make everybody pray to it, to make everybody fall down upon it and so forth when they heard music. And he enacted this. This was, now before we talked about more of a localized executive order, a state executive order, and a national executive order. This was an international executive order because his empire ruled all.
Exactly.
So he enacted, what he stated was to go forth for all the world. And I'm going to go ahead and pick it up in Daniel 3, and I'll jump around, start with 1. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold whose height was, and it goes on telling how tall it was and so forth.
And while you're reading that, hopefully our camera can pick up this image that he made.
Okay. And I'll pick it up a little further down, verse 4. And it says, then an herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages. So again, this is all people, nations, and languages. At what time you hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, the dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. And whosoever falleth not down and worship shall the same hour be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace.
Wow.
Therefore, at that time, then all the people heard the sound, and of course, they fell down and worshipped it. all except for 3 Hebrew men.
Right.
Well, actually 4 if you include Daniel. And what we normally, when you speak of some of the common churches, what they speak of is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Right.
But if you go back in the scriptures, you realize that
Hebrew names.
exactly, and Nebuchadnezzar just renamed them, same way he did with Daniel. And their real names, I'll go ahead and state those: are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. These brothers weren't going to do that. They know this is totally against the laws of Yahweh. And our people should know that because it states it back in Exodus and the 10 Commandments.
Exactly.
You know, you shall have no other God besides himself.
Nor fall down and worship.
Certainly, certainly. So again, this was the international executive order that was put out, and this was martial law.
Right.
And just like you stated, if you didn't fall down, you were going to be thrown into the fire furnace. And we know as the story goes on, this is not the case.
Right.
Yahweh, just like we have to look towards the future now, we should not, regardless of what is put upon us, we should not fall down and worship whatever is given to us.
Exactly.
We should not fall down and go along with the things that the society is set up for us, the status quo. We should not do Christmas. We should not do Easter.
Right.
We should not go to church on the first day, on the Son's day. We should not do any of these things, but we should keep the laws, statutes, and judgments that Yahweh set apart and set aside for his people to keep and for the rest of the world to keep.
Exactly.
So
I'd love to read their response, because obviously Nebuchadnezzar, they were told that there are these 3 Jews who would not fall down to his image, and he called them in and he said, you know, is it true that you aren't worshiping my God? And let me read their answer. Verse 16. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer you in this manner. If it be so, our Elohim, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand. But if not, be it known unto you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, nor worship the golden image which you have set up. To their life, they said, hey, either our God is going to deliver us or we're going to die.
That's right.
But we will not die worshiping your image.
Right.
And that is, like you said, that's what we've got to do. Because there was a time when the Romans actually implemented martial law during the times that Christianity was taken over. It was against the law to read the scriptures.
Right.
Only the so-called priests could read the scriptures. And if you were caught reading the scriptures, you were killed. It was against the law when they first imposed this whole Sunday thing to go to church on the Sabbath, which is Saturday.
Right.
If you did, you were killed. So what did people do? They changed, just like these people during Nebuchadnezzar's time. And we know that there's a future time waiting where they're going to implement this same kind of martial law.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and read that when this is going to be the case. And we can pick that up in Revelations. A lot of people have heard about this, but they don't really take it to heart. And it really seems to be more of just fables and stories. This book is nothing to do with fables or stories.
Absolutely.
Revelations 13, and I'll pick it up at 15 and go through 18. And he had the power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast would be killed. Again, this image. So even way back in here, in this future time, there's going to be another image that's going to be set up that people should fall down and worship. Verse 16. And he causeth all, both small and rich, small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark or the number of the beast or the number of his name. And again, we know we're getting closer to this, particularly when we start talking about the technology.
Exactly.
As far as implant, we have implant chips and all sorts of things. Verse 18, it says, here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666, and we know that is 6, 6, and 6.
Absolutely. And we've got a picture on the screen now, and this is this beast, or these amalgamations of nations that the Christian church controls or rides, meaning the Vatican. We know that they are pushing for this last 3.5 year reign over all the earth, when they're going to impose their law and their will upon man. And they're going to create that image that you just spoke about. And now that we have satellite television, there is nothing that can't be created in Jerusalem or in Vatican City that can't be broadcast throughout the world. In Nebuchadnezzar's time, heralds had to go out and ride from one city to another to give that whole scenario of falling down to worship the beast when the music played. Well, today, they don't have to do that. Whatever time it comes on in your city or place, you better be falling down to worship it, because if you're told that you're not worshiping that image, you're going to be killed. So where are you going to be if you don't have the protection of the Most High during that time?
Absolutely.
That's what we as Hebrew Israelites and those of other races and nations who want to know the truth and want to keep the truth, you need to be thinking about that question, because there will be 3.5 years of terror upon the earth where everybody will take this mark and a number of this image and worship it. So we need to get ready. Let's talk a little bit about King Herod. What did he do? This was during the time of the birth of the Messiah. Tell us about what he did to impose a type of martial law.
Okay. Well, when you, let me go to it. This is in, we can pick that up in Matthew 2, I believe. Let me go ahead. Matthew 2 and verse 16. And basically, this was at the point in time when Herod he sought after the Messiah. You know, he knew that there was going to be this king of Jews. He wasn't looking for a king of Christians. He was looking for a king of Jews, because the scriptures have stated it.
Exactly.
The people knew it. All the people at this point in time knew that he was on his way. He was coming. So he had already found out that he had been born and that the wise men had indeed met with him. So he knew around the time frame in which he was born. But he didn't know exactly where or when or what have you. So basically, he knew that the Messiah was at least 2 years old or younger.
Right.
So because of that, he wanted to destroy the Messiah. So in doing that, he put out an executive order. Once again, this martial law. I'm going to go ahead and read it. Matthew 2, and pick it up at verse 16. And it states, Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceedingly wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem, and all the coasts thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. That's inquired in regards to the Messiah.
Right.
And 17 says, Then it was fulfilled, that which was spoken of by Jeremy the prophet, saying, In Ramah was there a voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and would not be comforted because they are not.
Right.
And that was the fulfillment of a previous scripture in reference to, don't cry for me, cry for your
children.
Exactly.
Right.
And that was the case here. It's certainly the case now, but it's certainly the case at that point, because our children, all innocent babes, 2 years old and under, were slaughtered.
In one city.
Yes.
And Bethlehem was a major city at that time. Can you imagine? And we didn't have children like we do today, 1 or 2. There were many children. There could have been 2 children in the household that were under 2 years old.
Right.
Can you imagine a slaughter in every Hebrew home like that? But see, we don't realize that this has happened to our people, and that the scripture has been fulfilled. The same story you just read, I'm going to go back to Revelations and pick up what the scripture says about that. And this is in Revelations chapter 12. And we just saw the great dragon where the woman was riding. And this says, And there appeared, chapter 12, verse 1, And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, and we just showed that picture, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the ground. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And we know the dragon is Lucifer, or Satan, that old serpent called the devil. And he stood there to devour this child, the child of the Hebrew Israelites, who was Christ. So although we saw Herod implement this order, this was Lucifer.
Exactly.
Listen, stood there to devour her child for as soon as it was born. Verse 5, And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto Elohim and to his throne. So he didn't devour that child. Actually, Yahweh told Joseph and Mary, he said, take the baby and hide him down in Egypt until Herod is dead. And that's exactly what happened. So I don't care what Satan has for our people. He has not been able to destroy us, and he will not be able to destroy us. Regardless of all his implementations of all these martial laws and acts of genocide upon us, he's not going to be able to touch us. Praise Yah. Okay, we just had a picture up, and it was called the Fourth Reich. And that's actually a title of a book by Don McElvaney. And I'd like to read a little bit about what Mr. McElvaney says, because it really does help to bring us into this century and what's happened here. This says, America is plunging toward becoming a socialist police state, remarkably similar to Nazi Germany in the 1930s or the Soviet Union. America over the past few decades has seen its traditional values turned upside down in almost every area, to the extent that the killing of 27 million babies is called free choice. Homosexuality is simply an alternate lifestyle, officially sanctified and pushed by the liberal establishment and its media. The family is now under attack from the government, the media, the schools, the homosexuals, and the environmentalists. Pornography is now the norm on television, movies, and books and magazines, and more in classroom as students down to the kindergarten level are taught how to have safe sex or enjoy alternate sexual lifestyles. Our Christian so-called leaders and organizations and individuals are discriminating more and more against government or media who reject these views. In other words, the whole Christian governmental structure now is pushing these satanic views. And the more they push it, the more freedoms they take away from us. Because now there's no such thing as freedom of speech. You better not talk against the establishment, or you will be put in jail. And since September 11th, we see that all too soon, and much more as we go in. So as we can see that this society is ripe for martial law, because anything goes.
Right. And the populace is ready for it.
Exactly. They want that control.
Exactly. It took a major force like the whole September 11th bombing to get people to this point. They're already, kind of willing to give up some things because they wanted to make their whole existence better. They wanted to rid themselves of the undesirables. So they set up a lot of laws dealing with the undesirables. Now it's gone beyond that point to a whole nother level. Right. Now it's like like you said, you can't go shopping at the shopping mall because we're going to blow up the shopping mall.
Exactly.
So therefore, our people, all people, are fearful of that and willing to give up everything.
Wow. Let's talk a little bit about martial law as it is in the history of the United States. There have been times, you talked about recently with Florida, but let's talk about some other times when martial law was implemented in the United States.
Okay. Well, like you stated, martial law has been in existence throughout time, particularly in modern times, and in particular times throughout the United States history. And I'll just hit on a couple of points where it was in place.
Okay.
During the War of 1812, and this one obviously is some time back, but it's relevant in the sense of how power can be dealt with so easily. This was during the time when Andrew Jackson was the general, and he imposed martial law at New Orleans. And basically during this time, it was stated that at the end of the war he maintained martial law, even though it should have been over because the problem that was going on at that time was over. He went ahead and kept it, and also there was a judge that basically demanded that he release some of his prisoners simply because there was no reason to have them. Wow. Well, he put that judge in jail. And so that kind of thing. So basically during the point of the matter is during martial law anything is available. So he can put a judge in jail just for doing his job basically. And then there was another time that was dealing with also the public sector, or the private sector as it is, can also enact what he called martial law to go into effect. And that being mine owners. There were some large mines over in a location. And basically the owners wanted the mine workers to stop picketing, stop all that. Basically they went to the governor and had the governor say, well, look, they're destroying business. Can you enact martial law? And he did. Wow. And he did, and that happened several. That was more than one occasion where that was the case, where the industry owners picketed and they petitioned to the governors to have them to go ahead and do this, and they did, and they got their way. One of the times that we pretty much know of is the Tulsa race riot in 1921. Okay. And I think we have a graphic for that. And as we know, the entire Tulsa or Oklahoma riots happened in 1921, and it was our Black Wall Street. in the past, there have been some shows on PBS and some of the other stations, and also some books dealing with that. And during this time, this place in Tulsa, in Oklahoma, was our Black Wall Street. We had all our businesses. We owned banks, hospitals, schools, everything. You know, so that was like pretty much the epitome of our life at that point in time. And that's what we always say we want to get to. But you see,
what time period is that?
That was in 1921.
21. Okay.
And basically, you see, when studying that time period and what happened, it can be abolished by the powers that be in no time, instantly, exactly. And basically, at that point in time, martial law was enacted. It basically started just like most things at that time. There was an issue between a young black male and a young white female. She said he looked at her, or whatever the situation was. Basically, there was all sorts of rioting. The whites at that period of time went ahead and rioted the entire area and started a race riot. And at that time, they had the governor of the state to enact martial law.
Wow.
They brought in the National Guard and all sorts of things. Let me read a little bit about that. It states, Tulsa police arrested Rowland. This is the guy, it was in, this is coming from the Tulsa Tribune at this time. In early morning of June 1st, 1921, Black Tulsa was looted and burned by white rioters. The governor, Robertson, declared martial law, and the national troops arrived in Tulsa.
Wow.
And there we have a picture of it. And basically, by the time 24 hours later, after all this rioting started, there were 35 city blocks in ruins. So all these wonderful black businesses and everything they were charred. There was nothing left of them. There was 800 injured and about 300 deaths. So
that's deep.
Yes, it's that quickly. And obviously, our people have never gotten to that point again for such a large area. And that's the whole point, because the fact of the matter is the scriptures stated that we would be the tail and not the head.
Right.
So that would not be the case until all is fulfilled.
Absolutely. We're going to take a break right now for our news report, and we'll be right back.
Shalom, this is Ariel Ben Yisrael on Hero Israel in the news. In 1996, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD, provided a plan to profile and evict tenants in public housing suspected of any involvement in illegal drugs. The policy, one strike and you're out, was implemented under the Clinton administration but perfected by George W., who has defined substance use as an illness. In essence, public housing directors may evict entire families for drug use by one member, regardless of the use was on housing property or not. My question is, how are the drugs getting into federally funded housing communities if the tenants are not growing them, packaging them, or shipping the product into the neighborhood? Out of 4 million residents of U.S. public housing, more than 1 million are children. Children and senior citizens will likely suffer the most from this policy. In entertainment, are the big ballers and shot callers of our nation, the so-called Negro in America, also feeling the sting of discrimination? So-So Def's Top Gun Jermaine Dupri is looking to move his organization to another company that so-called respects his vision. This company he is trying to leave is the same one Michael Jackson accuses of racism and dishonesty concerning accounting practices and promotions. Though J.D. states in one of his songs, money ain't a thing, it just goes to show you, as sharecroppers, if the hand that feeds you decides to hold back, then what? As hot as it is right now in the summer, can you imagine not having water? Well, some residents in South Atlanta are suffering just that. Atlanta city officials have cracked down on housing complexes with delinquent water bills. The tenants state they have paid their bills, but the money never made it to the rightful organizations. These tenants are suffering on account of the negligence of the owners, and with the amount of children that live there in those complexes, the least thing we could do is negotiate some term for the children's sake. Deuteronomy 28 verse 47 states, because you serve not Yahweh your Elohim with joyfulness and with gladness of heart for the abundance of all things, therefore shall you serve your enemies, which Yahweh shall send against you, in hunger and in thirst, and in nakedness and in want of all things. He shall put a yoke of iron upon your neck until he has destroyed you. Yahweh shall bring a nation against you from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flies. a nation whose language you shall not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. Once again, this has been Ariel Ben Yisrael on Hero Israel in the news.
Just a minute.
Back.
Welcome back to Hear, O Israel, and our show entitled Martial Law. I'd like to take a few minutes to invite you out to the Cultural Center of the New Covenant Congregation of Israel. We are located at 3901A Covington Highway in Decatur, Georgia, 30032. Our phone number is 404-286-5869. And we do have a website. You can log on to www.thencci.com, where you can actually view these videos, video shows, as well as our Sabbath day service. That's www.thencci.com. We have several classes prepared for you throughout the week for your learning and for your knowledge. So by all means, come by and check us out. We're here every Sabbath day, beginning for our Sabbath service at 1 o'clock p.m. Bring your Bible, your pencil, your tape recorder, bring your minister, wherever you want to bring. Come on out and join us for a Sabbath service of the Most High Yahweh. We have a pre-Sabbath class that begins at 11 o'clock on the Sabbath day as well. On the first day of the week, we have a prophecy class at 10:30 a.m. On Tuesday night, we have a history class starting at 8 o'clock. And on Thursday evening, there is a sisters-only Bible class that starts at 8 o'clock. So many different ways for you to come out, but you may also call us, send us an email if you'd like more information on this show or any information. We have a packet that we'll be more than happy to send you. So again, we invite you out to the Cultural Center so that you can begin to learn more than what you've been taught in that verse that you get on Sunday. Because believe me, it's not going to save your soul when this whole thing comes down. And that's what we're here for, is to share with you exactly how this is going to be implemented and impact your life. Because if you're not ready, you're going to be taken in that snare and in the pit that the wicked has laid. Johanna, we talked about some of the things that's happened in martial law, and you talked about the whole incident of the Tulsa race riot. And I think what's so important about that is that when we were separated, we had our own businesses. We had to have everything for our own communities. And as a matter of fact, Europeans would come into our communities, to the Harlem elite, and down on Auburn Street in Atlanta, Georgia, in Tulsa. They would come to us because they always wanted what we had. And today it's the same way. But today we're going to them. We're spending our monies in their communities since the 1960s. So that Tulsa race riot, we should all go back and check that out because, again, our people were set up with hospitals and banks, everything as a society should be. Today we don't have that. But we see other nations, aliens, Mexicans, the Asians coming over and doing the same things for themselves that we have not been able to do since the early 20s to the 50s. And that's sad.
Most definitely. As a matter of fact, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen this, just going down the street and you see a gas station. I looked at the gas station and I was sitting in traffic, so I looked over at the gas station and noticed there weren't many signs that I could read. Most of the signs were in Spanish. I couldn't read most. I sat there. I was like, wow.
That's deep, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Or going to your nail salon. You know, they're speaking a language that you don't understand, and they could care less that you don't understand it. They're not talking to you. They may be talking about you, but definitely not to you. But here Jacob is, the so-called Negro, going on every day. You know, thank God it's Friday. Where do I go to spend this money to get me something to drink and some drugs and party? And we're happy. And we see, and the world is crumbling in around us everywhere. But we don't bother to take a look at what's going on. Let's talk a little bit about early 1992, during the time that video helped to, I mean, obviously, our people have been beaten to death by police forever, and it still hasn't stopped. But this particular time, it was videotaped. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, like you stated, finally, I mean, you know, basically the whole deal with that was our people were we weren't happy, but we were glad that it finally was actually on tape. You know, we've been saying this for years and years, you know, look at what you're doing to our people. Here it was, in black and white, in color. that this was the case. And surely these police officers are going to go to jail. Well, we know the story. That didn't happen.
Right.
All
Rodney
four
King
of them,
was just beat.
Rodney King was just beat down. That's about it. So basically, when that happened and they were released, our people in Los Angeles basically lost it. We lost it. And went ahead and, like we normally do, we tore up our own place. You know, we tore it up. We burnt it down. We looted, all that good stuff. And basically, in response to this, again, another executive order, or more so a martial law, was enacted at this point in time. So now, before we were talking about sometime back in the century previous. Now we're talking to up-to-date time frame that this martial law was set aside for us in our own community. And during that time, I want to read a little bit about that. Like you said, it was in April of '92. And it was President Bush issued a proclamation commanding all persons engaged in such acts of violence and disorder to cease and desist. And then what he did was set up a joint task force. And this joint task force was comprised of U.S. infantry, Marines, federalized units of the California National Guards, in addition to other troops that were there. So basically, they created this joint task force, a new creation, to deal with our people, to go in there with their riot gear, with their stun guns, with their rubber bullets, which they claim that rubber bullets aren't supposed to be harmful, but rubber bullets do pierce the skin.
Absolutely.
And, you know, particularly if you're talking about bruise and actually cause blood and the whole nine.
Really?
So that, in addition to, you know, the spraying directly in the face, in addition to the tear gas in the face. So these things, people, you know, think, oh, well, it's okay, they're not really. Yes, they are. People can die from these things, and did.
Exactly. I mean, we need to just go back to the 60s when our people were hosed down. I mean, police, National Guard, everyone, Sheriff's Department, everyone was out against us for what was a peaceful demonstration. Supposedly we had what? Freedom of speech. Supposedly we, as citizens of this so-called USA, should have been able to march peacefully, but instead we received dogs, water hoses, knocking people down, dogs biting them. Why is that if that wasn't but martial law being imposed?
Exactly.
We are not supposed to speak our piece. We have no freedoms in this country, and it's still like that today, unfortunately.
And that was even the case, just last year with the whole Cincinnati riots. The same thing all over again. Martial law was, and see, the thing is, they don't mention that martial law is enacted during these things. They pretty much just, when you look at the television sets and the news, you just see, quote-unquote, police officers taking care of the business, you know, in their riot gear and so forth. But you don't realize this is martial art, and this was martial law, and it was enacted, it was signed upon, and everything else. As a matter of fact, I think we have a graphic on, and this may be the instance where the Cincinnati riots. And basically, when you see in this, yeah, that's it. And when you look at this, I have a little write-up. This came off the internet. And this is what it says. It says, it's completely normal in Russia to have the military searching your luggage on the highway. But this is America. And if you see, that's in the first graphic number 1. It says, city dump trucks and police blocked our camera's view of the day's bizarre events, covering their faces. And that's in number 3 and also number 4. What's the definition of secret police? And it also it says, this is all written part of the article. It says, what? Did he forget his black ski mask at home? Because if you see, you're looking there, that the faces are covered. This is truly, like you said, secret police. He said this is one of the 2 Black Hawks, those would be the helicopters, that suddenly took off from behind the gas station. And one of the many white vans or trucks you've been hearing about that was at the scene. And again, these are secret operations that were going down. And in just dealing with some of the movies and so forth, Enemy of the State, that was where they kind of talked about that whole, the Black Hawk helicopters that come in. You don't know they're there until they've landed, until they've done what they need to do. It's completely silent, and it can rise and come down at will, no problems.
That's so deep. You know, that gets us into our this whole issue of technology as it relates to martial law. Back in 1996, during the time that the Olympics was in Atlanta, we saw a great infrastructure, building infrastructure that took place. And part of that infrastructure was placing cameras everywhere, surveillance cameras everywhere throughout the city. And now, if you are just driving along on any major highway and your car happens to stop, before you know it, you've got these emergency vehicles pulling up beside you. Are you okay? You need help. How did they know? Because you are being watched
Right.
every single day. And because I'm privy to some information in the Fortune 500 company I work for, we were told that they could read your license inside your car from where they are at these command posts throughout the city. So I tell you, don't do anything in your car that you don't want these people to see, because Big Brother is watching. And it is to make sure that you are coming and going as they see fit, not as you see fit anymore. And that's what we've got to remember. Big Brother's watching. They have the technology to go and search. Now they pass laws to search your car, even if you haven't done anything.
Right.
They could get you out of your car and search every bit of it just to see whether you've done anything.
Well, on that whole deal about searching the car, that again goes back to some of these these laws that are being passed that we don't see for what they are. For instance, the whole seatbelt, buckle, the click it or ticket.
Right.
Now that is what that does is enable police officers to stop you. You're driving along, you're driving the proper speed limit, you're doing everything correct. How do you prove that you had your seatbelt on?
Exactly.
There's no proof of that. So therefore, that pretty much is wide open for stopping anyone that you feel like stopping.
That's right.
And that's what that law, exactly, that's what that law allows.
And on top of that, remember that they're profiling.
Yeah.
They're stopping us. They're not stopping your white American who may have the bombs in their car or the capability, the things that you use to make a bomb. They're stopping us. But we've got some things on the screen now. Let's talk about this technology a little bit, John, and this whole surveillance and the chips and things like that.
Exactly. Okay, if they pick up the picture that is far to the right, it's talking about CCTVs on the highways and the streets, and that's what you just now spoke about.
Right.
The CCTV is your closed-circuit television, and these closed-circuit television units just kind of made it on the scene around our area in Atlanta within the last year.
Right.
If you remember, during this time period, 285 was pretty much shut down. Every other weekend, 285 was shut down.
Right.
For what reason? The reason was to lay down the cable that was necessary to run the cable in order to see your fiber optics. After the cable was running, then we started seeing all these very tall poles.
Yeah.
And, of course, nobody mentions, what's the purpose behind all this. We just pretty much see that, oh, they're doing road construction. No, it wasn't road construction. It was surveillance to watch you.
Exactly.
And with the surveillance, we see that not only these cameras, if you're still showing the graphic, the heads of these cameras are rotatable. So they can follow you wherever you are. There's no real place that is, quote-unquote, hideable for these areas, because it will pretty much track you down. And again, going back to that movie, Enemy of the State, that's how they tracked them down. They watched them from post to post to post to post.
Right.
Exactly. So these things are being set up, and our people aren't even thinking about it. And if you also think about it, it's not, a lot of people tell you it's about speed, keeping the speed down. Speed has nothing to do with it, because within a mile radius, you don't need 10 cameras to track speed.
Exactly.
That's really ridiculous. That is not the case. The case is surveillance, so that at any point in time, if you're on the national highways, we know where you are.
Right.
And you can pick that up as far as tracking our people and knowing where we are. That's going to go back. That's, again, going back to the scriptures. We pick that up in Revelations and picking up in Revelations 12. And this is Satan, the dragon, chasing us down, looking for us in the coves and in the rocks and so forth and so on. And I'll pick up at verse 13. And it states, when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman, that woman being Israel, which brought forth the man-child, that man-child being the Messiah. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she may fly into the wilderness, into her place, which is where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. We know this is the 3.5 years that our people, when the rest of the nations will be going back to their homeland. So if you're a German American, you're going back to Germany.
Right.
If you're an Irish American, you go back to Ireland. Our people, we know, have no place to go. Yahweh will take our people en masse to this secret place.
Okay.
So, and then it says, the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And this we know is the damming up of the river and so forth, in order to try and kill our people, searching out for our people, utilizing things such as the GPS systems and our CCTVs and so forth. And the earth helped the woman, and the woman opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of Yahweh and have the testimony of Yeshua the Anointed. So truly we know these things are going to be used to seek our people out. Right now you have a graphic up. is talking about a TIPS program. And this TIPS program is pretty new. This is getting ready to come out.
Right.
And just like the graphic says, it says coming to one of 10 cities near you this fall. And this TIPS program basically equates to neighbors spying on neighbors.
Right.
So not only now do they have the police force and the National Guard and all these other different systems set up. Now in addition to that, we're going to have your friend next door. On Thursdays, we see them. They always hang out their laundry on Thursdays, and there's something weird about that. It's a 1-900. It's a 1-800 number that they can call, or I should say it's a number that they can call, and toll free. And basically telling the neighbors. So now we really have Big Brother watching.
Wow.
So every aspect is being handled, from the national to the local to the guy next door. As a matter of fact, when you think about these CCTVs and so forth, they are combining the public sector and the private sector, because when you go in, if they're searching for someone, instead of just using these CCTVs that are on the highways, if you go into a gas station, we know that all gas stations, all the different service marts and everything else have closed-circuit television. What happens? They go there, the authorities go there, and give me your tape.
Exactly.
And then they know everything, which direction you went in, everything.
Absolutely. So don't even think about trying to pay, not pay for your gas.
Yeah,
you will be caught immediately.
No doubt.
But our people they're immune to this stuff. They see it, but they don't see it. But today you have this whole global positioning. It's a global thing. This whole surveillance is a global thing, because we live in a global society. And they are going to use these things to track the undesirables. And right now we think that they're the Muslim nations, but it's us. Just like you read in Revelation 12. Satan is after the Hebrew Israelites, those who keep Yahweh's commandments. Even though they may not know they're Hebrew Israelites, they're after us, because we are destined to rule this entire earth for 1,000 years in complete peace. They don't want that. The Europeans, along with Satan, because of their god, Mars, the god of war, they want blood. And that's what they've been after from time immemorial. That's why they eat their meat raw, with blood coming out. So they're after blood. I don't care if September 11th had never happened. They would still be over in Afghanistan right now. It's not because of what happened in September 11th. It's because they want the oil. And they're going to take it by hook or crook. And we need to understand these things. But, of course, we're being lulled to sleep by movies like The Siege and like the one you just mentioned. But look at that movie. I think it was Bruce Willis that played the part of this general, and he said, you do not want the army in New York City. Well, what happened? Martial law was imposed on that movie in New York City, and the undesirables were quickly marched into what? Holding pens. And do you know that since the 60s, they've been closing up school after school in our community to turn these schools into minimum security prisons. And I think I hear the music that our show is ending, believe it or not. But I'd like to thank you for joining me, and hopefully our audience has gotten something out of this show. There's a lot more for you to learn, so give us a call at 404-286-5869, and we can share this information with you. Or come by the New Covenant Congregation of Israel at 3901A Covington Highway. Again, our Sabbath is held on Saturday. That's the Sabbath day at 1 o'clock p.m. Bring your Bibles, because we read the truth. Then we can explain the truth to you. But thanks again for watching us, and good night.